You ever see those posts like please share? It'll only take a second. You are probably one of 3 people. Whenever you see these posts, you're probably one, the person who automatically shares it and doesn't think anything of it because your conscience is at rest. Or you're number 2 and you completely ignore it because why should you share something that you have no business being a part of? You could also be number 3, where you click on the link to gather more insight into what you are actually sharing and redistributing into the world you live in, so as to have some type of context to how you're attributing or hurting the greater picture. Or you could be like me and put an additional 10 hours into making a video and doing research on how 424,000 kids are missing as of 2018.
Yo, Pierre, you want to come out here? Nani?
Early in August, there was a big story about Oluwafemi, who went missing in the Chicago Greaterland area. He was a 30-year-old black father who had a fiance, and there was a lot of things about this story that really made me concerned about what was going on. Femi was last seen jumping boats with his friends, mingling with the group of people that he had rented a boat out with, and that is when things started to go awry. No one was really able to identify what happened to Femi after a certain point. It is believed that he was no longer on the original boat that him and his friends had rented out, but that led to greater questions like, why did Femi leave the boat without his cell phone, his wallet, or his carry-on items? Why weren't any of his friends innately aware of where he was at the time? I tell you this story not to add a layer of conspiracy. What happened to Oluwafemi is extremely disheartening, and I really feel for the friends and families of his, but it really makes me question, what role are we playing in the disappearance of our own people when legitimately a 30-year-old man can disappear in broad daylight? Oluwafemi was found 3 days later, deceased. But this is a constant reminder to me to pay attention to my surroundings, and more importantly, pay attention to the people who are in my surroundings, because if you're like me, you usually keep a close-knit group of people around you, so why wouldn't you want to know what is happening to them at any given time they're within your presence? Here's some facts. Most local law enforcement will take reports on missing individuals, especially adults and children, but they're ranked in tier. So for example, someone who is being reported as missing and is over the age of 18 and isn't being faced with immediate death, they will be put on a lower tier. And it is for that reason that I'm primarily going to be focusing on children who are missing, because usually when a child is missing, it is not their fault, and they are probably more than likely at someone else's mercy. In 2018, a grand total of 424,000 kids were considered missing in the United States. If your kid goes missing and they're found within 72 hours, there's a 70% chance they will be found in good health. But after that, their chances of survival drastically drop. A nonprofit database called Name Us has been established and works in conjunction with the FBI and other government agencies to help identify missing people's remains. Name Us database has only been able to reference 16,450 different people. And now black people, you're probably thinking, well, I'm not really worried about this because black people are technically, statistically less likely to be targeted by serial killers and don't really have to worry about issues of like missing people. And that's where you're wrong. The demographical information provided to us by Name Us has given us an insight to really how many black people go missing and no one really notices it. 2,595 people on this list of nearly 12,000 missing people are black people. And that number is a little shocking because we only make up 18% of the total population. So when this number is adjusted for inflation, that means we make up 40% of the missing people in this country. That should be alarming to you, especially since the things that usually affect black people usually revolve around our government, from a social economic standpoint, all the way to the fact that if you are under the age of 18 and you're a black male, you have a greater chance of dying at the hands of an officer than you do in a car accident. Okay, let's move to a POI. Are those stupid Facebook posts really worth posting? The answer is yes. No. Only 40% of millennials, which are people aged 25 to 39, use cable. And ages 4 to 24, which make up Generation Z, only 15% of them have cable. because people are dumb and they'll share things just out of necessity or out of clickbait or just to be recognized. A lot of the things we put on social media is just so people focus on us, even if it is for someone else's benefit. For example, this post was posted on my timeline, but upon further inspection, clicking on the link, it led me to realizing that this person had already been found and they were already dead 3 days ago. There's no point in me even sharing this because there's probably a good chance that the person sharing it didn't vet the information they're giving to me. So why should I waste my time when the person who's posting something about someone else they claim to care about didn't even check to see if it was relevant? A vast majority of young people get their news, health, and advice from social media. Influencers, so to speak. The Kardashians, the Philip DeFrancos, you name it. If they have a following, they're the primary source of information for that person. So yeah, it is super important for us to share this information because that is usually how most of us find out about these things. Seeing as how we don't watch the news, we don't read newspapers, and we don't listen to radio, the only way you could actually get a millennial to hear about some really interesting things is by putting it in front of them on the social media platforms they listen to, watch, or the people they talk to. And a cold hard fact is that millennials and boomers share misinformation at the same rate. About 30% of the information millennials and boomers share on social media is completely false. And that in itself is a big problem because you're sitting here thinking grandma's stupid, but you're the big dummy. Websites like Black and Missing and Missing and Exploited Children are websites that have partnered with Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitters to make sure that information about missing people is updated in real time and has been peer reviewed. So sharing those posts do make a difference and you're doing the right thing. And this is a very interesting and one-off topic, but a lot of these missing children posts are usually fake and they're designed or created by predators designed to help them identify people or children who could be vulnerable to them. And you're probably thinking that's wild. Well, here's an article all about it in the Huffington Post. But if you think that's crazy, here's Naomi. She met this person online after her image was shared as missing. That predator was a pedo who moved into a new neighborhood under the guise of his sister's name. But believe it or not, children going missing isn't always the parents' fault. And here are some reasons why. About half the kids who have autism in today's day and age experience something called autism wander. And autism wander is just that. It's just what it sounds like. An autistic child wandering away because they weren't really being watched. Autistic wander usually revolves around one of two things: the autistic child's interest in the world or the autistic child trying to get away from overstimulus. In the event that they are wandering towards things that are bigger than them. Think of train stations, bus stops, vehicles, highways, large bodies of water. You might very well see a child just staring off into the distance, and then the latter of the two, which is the trying to escape the intense stimulation of the world, this revolves around them going into dark, hidden, isolated places. So it's super important for us to be innately aware of children like this, but nothing really beats just, watching your kid. Family abduction is 5% of how kids usually go missing. And while these kids aren't usually put into dangerous positions, it is still a different and difficult situation to deal with because about half of those kids do receive physical harm from that loved one. And while overall half of them do survive and are perfectly fine, there are still laws and regulations that dictate how these things are supposed to be happening. This usually results from a bad divorce or an overly zealous individual or religious household. People who have access to your child's social security number, the ability to pick them up in identified places, or a person who your kid readily knows and is willing to approach in public are people who could target your child for any reason and any reason at all. That doesn't make everyone that knows your kid dangerous. It just means you should know everything there is to know about that person who knows something about your kid. Even lower than autistic wander and child abduction via family is abduction from healthcare facilities. This was something that really raged on back in the day, but has calmed down significantly due to the technology and all the security posts that have been implemented since then. So then you're wondering, how the hell are all these kids missing if you You just told me that autism monitoring, family abduction, and child abduction not being that relative to the list. How are all these kids going missing, and why aren't we doing anything about it? You'll probably remember this video.